Working from the center and out opens up a whole new world of possibilities in knitting. It's not just for doilies anymore. Shawls, hats, blankets, toys, sweaters with unusual constructions, so many different projects can be knit from the center and out. In this video, I'll show you 3 ways to get started. The first way is the easiest of them all. It does not require any special skill. Simply cast on 8 stitches using the cast on you like. I used long tail cast on right here to get these stitches on my needle. You can use knit on, cable cast on, any type of cast on, unless it's really bulky at the bottom, because we don't need any bulk. This type of project is gonna be worked in the round. So use any type of the needle that you like, as long as it allows you to work in the round. So it could be double pointed needles, it could be 2 circular needles, it could be 1 circular needle like the one that I'm using right here. Now that you have the initial cast on the needle, divide the stitches between needles. If it's double pointed, then you would slip, divide those into 3 or 4 groups depending on how many needles you're using, and slip them on each of those needles. If you're using 2 circulars, then you would slip half of the stitches to the other needle, and in my case I'm going to simply slide the stitches to the center of the circular needle, then divide it in half and get ready for working in the round. The first round would be the increasing round. We would start increasing right away to make sure that our little center is flat when we finish the project. It's not really sticking out like a bump over there. So we will start from increasing stitches. We would make 2 stitches out of 1, and we would do that by knitting each stitch first through the front loop and then through the back loop. So we'll knit the stitch as usual, but I don't slip it off yet. And then with the right needle I go to the back and knit it again through the back loop. Now slip it off and see what happened. We have 2 stitches instead of 1. And do that, the same thing, knitting in front and back with every one of the 8 stitches you have, and then we will end up with 16 stitches. We are starting with 8 stitches because we'll be making little squares, but if your pattern tells you to start with a different number of stitches, then of course follow your pattern. Okay, I finished the first round. I'm gonna rearrange the needles to get ready for the second round, and while we still remember where the beginning of the round is, it's a good idea to place a stitch marker right here. So now we are ready to move on to the next round, and that's gonna be a simple round of knitting stitches. So we knit every one of the 16 stitches we have on the needles right now. Okay, here we go. And that was the setup for working in your main pattern. I'm gonna move the work to the needle so I could better show you what's happening. We have basically a little piece that's already worked in the round, and we have this hole in the middle. We don't need it, right? We want it to be closed, but we won't do it right away. We will keep working in the main pattern until you finish the project, or at least until you finish a few rounds, so you have more kind of body to your project. And then when you have more rounds, you will need to come back to the center, like see, like this square over here. You need to come back to the center and close the gap and close that hole. You will do it with the wool needle. Simply thread the yarn tail into the wool needle and run it through every one of those 8 stitches we cast on, just like this. See, that's why it's a good idea not to use bulky cast-ons, because we don't need any additional bulk in here. And just a few more stitches. I think that should be it. And now simply pull the yarn like this. See, that's the magic of pulling the yarn and closing the gap. And then transfer the yarn tail to the wrong side. And as we have it already in the wool needle, it's a good idea to weave it in right away. The second way of starting to knit from the center out is a bit more fiddly than the first one, but not really complicated. So take your yarn and place it on your left index finger like this, and then hold it with your little finger and the ring finger like this, and then you hold the strand, the tail itself, you hold it with your thumb and the middle finger like this. So that's the setup. And now with this tail that's hanging there, you make a loop so that the tail is at the back of the working yarn, like this. And hold this loop. Now take the needle, insert it into the loop, and then grab that strand that runs between the thumb and the index finger, like this. And pull it out from the loop. Now pick the yarn again from left to right, like this, creating the second stitch. You do it without inserting the needle into the loop. That's the key. Now you go into the loop again and grab the yarn again. This time we do it from right to left, like this. Now we have 3 stitches already. Then outside the loop, inside the loop, outside the loop, inside the loop. And keep going until you get the number of stitches you need plus 1 extra stitch. Why? Because if the number of stitches is even, if we stop here, then this is just a yarn over, it will unravel. We need that additional stitch that we get from inside the loop to keep the stitches from falling apart. In my case, I need 8 stitches, so I'm going to cast on 9. Let's see how many I have here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So that's it. I have my 9 stitches over here. Now pull the tail, the little tail a bit, like this, to kind of make the loop smaller and to keep the stitches from really falling apart from the needle. That's your cast on. Now divide the stitches between the needles and get ready for working in the round. Now that the stitches are arranged for working in the round, we could get started. Because this cast on is kind of flimsy, the stitches are not really staying together, they're basically just wraps. So we won't start increasing right away because it won't be comfortable. And why would we make our life harder, right? No reason for that at all. Another reason why we won't start increasing in the first round is because we still have 9 stitches and we need just 8. So we need to get rid of that extra stitch. The first round, we're gonna knit all stitches and we're gonna make 1 decrease. So we knit the first stitch and then we will knit 2 stitches together, getting rid of that extra stitch, and then you knit all stitches to the end of the round. Okay, here we go. Now that we have some body to our knitting, the stitches are not that flimsy anymore, we can pull the tail really tight to close that hole at the very center. So we don't, with this type of starting knitting from the center out, we won't get back to it later on. We do it right away. We close the hole and that's it, and we won't even think of it anymore. Now we are starting a new round, and this round is going to be all about increases. Just as we did with when we discussed the first way, we're gonna knit into the front and back of each stitch. If you want to make sure that the hole doesn't open again or as you knit, you can take both the tail and the working yarn and use both of them for to make the first stitch of the next round. So we would knit through the front, then you let go of the tail and work with just the working yarn, and then go to the back. We do the increases into each of the 8 stitches we now have on the needles, and we will end up with 16 stitches. Here we go. Get ready to work the next round, and now is a good time to mark the beginning of the round. So we will use a stitch marker again and place it right here to the first stitch or somewhere in the beginning. If you used my little tip and worked the first stitch of this round with both the yarn tail and the working yarn, remember that in the next round, when we'll be knitting all stitches, remember that this stitch that has 2 strands in it, that's just one single stitch, and you treat it as one stitch, not as 2, okay? And in this round, like I said, we're gonna be knitting all stitches. Okay, here we go. We finished the setup rounds, and now we are ready to work in the main pattern, whatever your pattern is, whatever you decide to do with this. But you can see that we have a lovely little center here, and it's already closed because we took care of it already, and it's gonna stay closed if you use the tail and the working yarn to make the first stitch. It's a lovely way to get started, and that's how it looks on a little square that I made. See, it sits at the very center. It's really nice, like a little flower, and it's not that complicated to make, right? Just like the previous way we've just discussed, the third way allows us to make the center closed right away, so we don't have that hole in the center that we need to address later on. We take care of it right away after the first round, and that's how we do it. First, make a loop with the yarn tail at the back of the working yarn like this. Hold that loop in your left hand, and then insert the needle from front to back into that loop. So that's basically what we're doing. We are simply wrapping the needle. Now align the yarn tail with the right needle and hold them together like this. Now wrap the yarn around the needle like this. Make one full wrap so that the yarn comes back to the bottom of the needle. Then hold the working yarn, take the tail, and wrap it around the working yarn like this. Basically, that's the provisional cast on. If you know how another way to do it, go ahead and cast on as you know, as you like. But it is very important that for this provisional cast on, we use the tail as the strand that holds the stitches. That's what really matters. So now make another wrap, hold it, and then wrap the working yarn with the yarn tail, and then again and again until you have 8 stitches on your needle. And this is my last stitch. Now that we make the last stitch, make another wrap. So wrap the working yarn with the yarn tail again. And that's it. The cast on is done. Divide stitches between the needles and arrange them for working in the round. We won't join stitches for working in the round, just like we did or didn't do in this case, right, in the previous ways. And we're gonna start increasing stitches right away, also by knitting in the through the front loop and the back loop of each stitch, and then we'll end up with 16 stitches as a result. Okay, the first round is done. I have 16 stitches. Now that we have some body to our work, we can pull the tail to close that hole in the middle, and same as we did with the second way, if you want this hole to stay closed, then use the tail and the working yarn together to knit the first stitch of the next round. Now let go of the tail and knit the rest of the stitches. This round is simple. We simply knit all stitches. And here we go. The setup rounds are done, and we are ready to start working in the main pattern. But before that, let's take a look at the work. See, just like the previous way, this hole in the very center is closed, so we don't have that big gap like we had when we discussed the first way of starting knitting from the center. So this one also gives you a nice neat finish at the very center of the work, and you can build up on that and work in the rounds on and on and on until you finish your project. And that's how it's gonna look on your project. I have this little square over here, and here I use the third way of casting on stitches for working from the center and out. Now you know 3 ways to start knitting from the center and out. Click the link in the description to get the written instructions for each of these ways and give them a try. Try every one of them and see which one you like better. Next week we'll put this skill to good use. I'll see you next Thursday.